Good morning, everyone. Benjamin here. Let's do another quick video. Today's what I wanted to talk about is bitterness. And oftentimes I'm just really talking to myself on these things, I think. But nevertheless, if it helps somebody else, it's like this is what I'm thinking through, and if it can be beneficial or helpful, then great. Why not share it, right? Beautiful day here in Colorado. You probably can't hear that, but it's raining outside. And it's just fantastic. It's been raining quite a bit lately, which is good. I think that perhaps in American culture right now, maybe it's always been this way, I don't know. Maybe I'm just becoming aware of it. It's like we have a culture of bitterness. We have a culture of complaining and lots of bomb throwing. And some of that's for good reason, right? But just the proverbial back and forth creating bitterness. I notice this in myself. I'll have spurts of time where I watch news, and I really will get into it. And it's kind of designed that way, right? It'll suck you in, and this is what's happening, and this is what this person's doing, whatever. And it's easy to get sucked into things that are controversial and contentious. I myself do it. And so I know, I'll have to step back and say, hey, for whatever, 3 months, I'm not watching this news or whatever, right? Just to get a break and get a reprieve. Because we kind of thrive off of satiation of always pushing the envelope, right? And things like news particular, it's designed to get you sucked in and then to get you throwing the proverbial bombs at the opposite, whatever it is, party, political party, people of different thought, whatever it is, you get it. We all are kind of steeped in that right now. I know I'm not the only one. But something on a more specific framework is not so much that person needs to do this so that their life can be better or that political party can be better or whatever it is. It's and in fact, the best teachers we have are in Scripture, right? It's Jesus is look, take care of this massive log that you have in your eye first before you even, address the speck that's in your enemy's eye or your neighbor's eye, right? And so it's take stock in yourself first. So let's talk about that for just a moment. Bitterness. And again, if you watch these or you talk to me, you poor individual, again, I talk a lot about the stuff with divorce, particularly divorce with children. And really having to deal on bitterness. I think it's very few people that can walk away from that unscathed and not face some of your own darkness in that, in your own bitterness. And I think that you wouldn't have to dig far or deep to find that the outcomes of bitterness in your life. If you're somebody that just continually harbors the bitterness and takes it in, and you don't forgive and move on, I think it degenerates people's bodies. And I'll give you an example. In my working with very aggressive people who are oftentimes on some kind of an intoxicant, they're on some kind of drug or alcohol or combination, and people are in a bad way. And just yesterday, I had to, how do I say this? I had to work with an individual that was very nasty person. Nobody could do right. Nobody was doing enough to try to help. People were bending over backwards trying to help this individual, but none of it was ever good enough. And there was just lots of verbal vomit trying to belittle or degrade. And this person had a shriveled up body, hunched over, could hardly even, and this could, I mean, of course, this probably had some medical issues as well, but it's like the person couldn't even lift their head. And they would just kind of stare out of an eye at you, kind of looking up at you and pointing and just saying really mean things. And this person was so bitter and so hurt and so nasty that even this person's body, over time of years of harboring that, had shriveled in on itself. I'll give you another example. And I don't mean to speak for my family here, but my mother's mother was known for being a very bitter person. And as I recall, this individual had been so nasty and so bitter for so many years that she had driven everybody away. Her kids hardly talked to her. Her grandkids barely talked to her. One of my cousins was saying that they saw this grandparent in the grocery store, and at first didn't even know it was her. And then she realized who it was. And it's kind of par for the course on my mom's side of the family up here. There's a lot of that type of, it's just weird. But the person had looked so different. My grandmother had looked so different. It was almost unrecognizable. And even my mother said, and I don't mean to speak for her, but it's just to make an example in this. That when my mother had gone and visited her mother, after some time, again, kind of same thing, didn't even recognize her, and was saying like, she was how did my mom word this? Like she was a tiny, angry woman at this point, and I realized she couldn't hurt me anymore, right? And it was like, after years of bitterness, resentment, unkindness, unhealth, like unthankfulness, just this, you get it, this bitterness, that even the person's body had just not presented itself well, right? Versus, let's say some other people in my family that I know, two people in particular, that even as they got older, there's a notable difference, right? Have you seen that before? Have you ever seen that? Somebody that was so angry and so bitter for so many years that even their body betrayed them. Like even their body collapsed down on them. Because I think you feel the weight of the world and everything on your shoulders constantly. And people that harbor bitterness love harboring it, right? And so even over time, it just sags your shoulders, it sags your posture. And you can tell over time the people that harbor bitterness, right? That's something that I think is a real thing, okay? Now, let's look at some things here. What does the Bible say about this really quick? Let's look at, it says just be careful about yourself that you don't fall short of the grace of God. It says, lest any root of bitterness take hold in you, right? Lest any root of bitterness take hold of you. And then by doing so, it says by doing so, many people become defiled or Some other translations in here have like corrupted, right? And so it's like, it says, look, watch yourself and make sure that the root of bitterness doesn't take root in you. Otherwise, it's going to defile, it says, or ruin a lot of lives, ruin a lot of people. Because when that root of bitterness grows down inside of us, and then we allow it to lash itself out at others, it's easy to entangle people in these other type of snares as well, with your words, with your actions, right? And it hurts a lot of people. It says here, if you have a bitter root, that it affects you whether you see it or not. By removing the bitter root, you preserve the peace and the faith among your relatives, friends, and coworkers. It's worth the fight, not only for you, but for everyone else who's involved, right? Now, getting rid of bitter roots is not an easy thing, right? Just like pulling weeds out here. It's like those roots are in deep, man, and you got to get in there and you got to yank them out and get them out at the root, right? So that they don't keep growing. You just cut it out, the whole thing, right? Otherwise, if you just cut it half off, it's going to grow back. Versus getting in there and digging out the roots and pulling things up, right? And this isn't an easy work. Like, that's not an easy task. That's not an easy work, especially if you come from a bitter family, if you have lots of bitter friends. Some of, again, the wisest teachers we have is in the Bible, and it talks about bitterness. It says rotting your bones. And so, we read here, and I think every good religious teacher, it's like everybody would be saying, get those bitter roots out. Get the roots out. We all know this, right? So let's bring this to divorce, of course. I think it's perfectly normal to work on bitterness post-divorce, especially if you have kids. That's perfectly normal. And I think if you are handling it well, progressively over time, you get better at letting things not fester, let's say. And I think there's something to moving on, getting better, removing the root of bitterness, doing the hard work, surrounding yourself with people that are also pulling out roots of bitterness, let's say, in themselves. Don't be around the people that are harboring bitterness, because you're all going to harbor bitterness together. And this person's bitter roots and this person's bitter roots, they're going to get entangled, and you guys are just going to bring each other down. So, like, I'm not the best at, I'm kind of a pessimist as it is, right? I always have been. And I would call it being a realist, right? So I think there's a difference between like being a pessimist, an out-and-out pessimist, and a realist. I think there is a difference. Nevertheless, surrounding yourself with people that are not bitter, I think helps tremendously. And I had some of these, I take that back. I've never had any bad, bitter people around me. Certainly not post-divorce. And maybe that's by the grace of God, because I just don't know people like that. And I don't associate with people like that. So, and I'm probably the more bitter one of people that I know. And I'm on my way to getting better, right? So, anyway, last thing. It's one thing to have forgiveness and not harbor bitterness, but it's another thing to get wise, to become wise. And I've had a fair amount of these conversations with single men who've been through nasty divorces with children and hardly see their kids and things like that. And it's really difficult for people to not let the root of bitterness take hold. But I think there's a difference between getting wiser and just being an idiot. Let me give you an example, because I'm not explaining that well. Let me give you an example. It's highly probable that, I'll just speak for myself, not some people that I know, though they are thinking this way as well. I will probably not marry again. Like, that's probably the case. I think I already know that. I just don't, I have never seen it work very well. Not in my immediate family anyway. And I've seen and experienced what happens when a divorce does take place. And so, I tell people this, is like, I sleep very well at night knowing I will never be divorced again. Like, no one's ever going to divorce me again. No one's ever going to drag me through child court again. No one's going to divorce court mafia me again. No one's going to collect child support from me again. By the grace of God, right? There go I. And so it's like, is that bitterness, or is that actually being wiser? Right? So I don't know. If anybody wants to share a thought on that, like maybe for somebody else, like that's just an example for me. But it's like, oh, you're so bitter and hurt, and who hurt you? And so why would you do this? You must hate women. And it's like, you're against marriage, you're pro-divorce. It's like, no, I'm not at all. I'm none of those things. I just know that it doesn't work for me, and I wouldn't not remarry because I'm bitter. It's because I know better, right? I know better now. And I don't want to have that opportunity to happen to me again. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, are there decisions that you make that it's like, oh, you must be bitter and hurt? It's like, no, I just know what's probably going to happen. And so I'm just going to avoid that situation altogether. I don't think that's bitterness. I think that's getting wise and taking care of yourself, to be honest. That's my thought. Anyway, I don't know. I was just rambling on there. But have you seen that before? Like, bitterness over time taking over somebody's body to where they actually cave in on themselves and they don't even look like themselves anymore, right? Forgiveness, of course, is the best way. Not harboring bitterness is the best way. What are your thoughts on, again, the example I gave? It's like, I won't marry again. Is that bitterness, or is that actually taking care of yourself? What are your thoughts? Thanks for listening.